Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga 2 in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1, Prologue. The sole survivor of an ancient race, Kall, son of the scientist Jor-El and his wife Lara Lorvan, was sent to Earth as an infant mere moments before Krypton was destroyed. Discovered by Jonathan and Martha Kent, the newly renamed Clark Kent was raised as a human by his new, loving parents. After his father's death, Clark took his heritage and traveled to the Arctic, where he activated the Fortress of Solitude and spent 4 years learning about his now extinct race before returning to his mother's side. Approached by Charles Xavier, Clark and his mother accepted places at the Xavier Institute for the Gifted, Clark as a tutor/mentor, while his mother, by unanimous acclaim, became the goddess of the kitchen. Clark moved the fortress, concealing it underneath the manor and using the technology in it to create defenses that were effectively unbreakable, giving the inhabitants the knowledge that they were truly safe. Joining the staff of the mansion, Ororo Monroe, Storm, Logan, Wolverine, and Professor Xavier himself, Clark soon befriended the 2 students already there, Scott Summers, Cyclops, and Jean Grey. More students soon came to the mansion to join them: the teleporter Kurt Wagner, Nightcrawler, Catherine Pryde, Shadowcat, Anna Kent, Rogue, and Ororo's nephew Evan Daniels, Speak. At Logan's request, Clark helped to recover and heal Logan's old friend Steve Rogers, Captain America, who had spent several decades in cryogenic stasis. Xavier's enemies were not idle during this time. While gathering powerful mutants to become his acolytes, Magneto sent one of his lieutenants, the shape-changing Mystique, to gather younger mutants to counter Xavier's students. The 4 recruited mutants, Lance Alvarez, Avalanche, Todd Polanski, Toad, Fred Dukes, Blob, and Magneto's son Pietro Maximoff, Quicksilver, became known as the Brotherhood. Although they faced off against Xavier's students several times, they soon settled into an uneasy truce until the day that Pietro betrayed Mystique at his father's orders, attempting to kill Superman as he did so. Rescued from imminent interrogation and torture, Mystique officially, albeit temporarily, allied herself with Xavier's forces, reuniting first with her son, Kurt, then her one-time adopted daughter, Rogue. Her defection allowed Xavier to discover Magneto's plans and, with the aid of the Avengers, move to counter them. Magneto's flawed plan to transform the population of Earth into mutants using a kryptonite-enhanced energy wave came within seconds of wiping out humanity, but a new factor was introduced. Xavier's half-brother, Cain Marko, Juggernaut, was flung into battle by Superman and promptly seized the keystone of Magneto's plan, the Gem of Sidorak, the very item that had empowered Juggernaut years previously. The resulting explosions destroyed Magneto's plan, but he managed to escape with many of his followers. With the threat negated, the Avengers and the X-Men returned to their own lives. The 3 remaining members of the Brotherhood, since Pietro had fled with his father, returned to Bayville in a stolen plane, where they were met by Mystique, who decided to continue leading them, this time in a stance of neutrality. Superman chose to use the respite, as brief as it may be, to go back to what was once his home world to see if there was anything left that he could claim as his birthright. Juggernaut, freed from the induced rage of the demon Sidorak but still possessing its power, remains loose. Chapter 2, Memories. Catherine Pryde, known as Kitty to her friends and Shadowcat when she was wearing the uniform of the X-Men, sat in a window, typing at her laptop computer in the dawnlight. Dear Mum/Dad. It's been almost a week since the events at the asteroid, and finally I have enough time to sit down and write to you about what happened. I know that you won't be happy about me, your little girl, heading into battle against an evil overlord, but I had to do it. If I hadn't, you'd be dead, as would I. And the whole world. I can't give many details, it's been classified 20 ways from Sunday, but it was probably the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. Superman couldn't come with us, because if he had, he'd have died instantly, but we had the Avengers with us, which almost made up for Clark's absence. Since that day, we've been answering questions and working to get our 2 newest members settled. Piotr and his little sister Ilyana. Piotr's huge and can turn into living metal, he lives up to his name of Colossus. Ilyana doesn't have any powers, she's pure human, but that doesn't matter, she's one of us now. Anyway, things are finally settling down at last. Principal Darkholm is retiring from Bayville High, we're getting a new principal called Edward Kelly. Seems he's the younger brother of Senator Robert Kelly, the one pushing for power registration. I'm still not sure if this is good or bad. Anyway, yesterday, Professor X said that we're going to get more students. I guess that Colossus is going to earn his keep keeping the new ones in line. The mansion is still amazing, I really want you to come over sometime and see it. However, Clark played a prank on me. I sometimes forget to open doors before walking into a room, sometimes I don't even use doors, so before he left on that secret mission of his, he outfitted every wall, floor, and door with field inducers. They shut down in an emergency or at the teacher's request, but it means that I can't take any shortcuts, and I have the bruises to prove it. Grrrrrr. School is still good, my friends are still my friends, and all seems right with the world again. Missing you with all my heart. Your little kitten. With a sigh, Kitty saved and sent the email, then closed her laptop and stretched. Opening her eyes, she almost leapt off the windowsill in shock, then slapped her hands over her mouth in an attempt to cover her startled eep. Logan effortlessly caught her laptop before it could hit the floor and, with a lopsided smile, handed her a cup of coffee. Doing okay, kid? Don't you make any noise. Kitty half snapped, adrenaline still spiking in her system, and Logan laughed. Sorry, kid. Habit. About the only two I've not been able to do that to are Chuck and Flyboy. Chuck always detects me with that dimmed mind stuff of his, while Flyboy can hear me coming from across the institute grounds. Magneto don't count, 'cause he ain't one of us. Kitty finally accepted the coffee and sipped it as Logan placed her laptop on the table. If I didn't say it before, kitten, I'll say it now. You did good at the asteroid. I spent most of the fight hiding. Kitty half protested and Logan nodded. You hid, yeah, but you still helped out. Natalia would be dead if not for you, and don't think I didn't notice you saving Speak from being crushed. You still need training, but for your level, you did better than I expected. All of you did. Kurt, stop lurking and come in, there's more coffee in the pot. Guten Morgen. Kurt muttered as he entered the room. Kitty nodded to him, and as Kurt poured himself a cup of coffee, Logan moved to the side and switched on the television, changing the channel to get the news. School is going to seem so tame after what happened. Kitty noted and Kurt nodded. And campers have been attacked in the Canadian wilderness. Both Kitty and Kurt stared as Logan jolted round, his attention transfixed by the screen. Wreathies have closed Mount McKenna National Park until further. Logan. Kurt asked slowly. Are you? Logan snarled and stalked out of the kitchen, leaving the two teens staring after him in confused silence. After a moment, Kitty spoke. Even for Logan, that was abrupt. J.A. Yes, old friend. Logan slumped onto the bench next to where Xavier was reading and absently helped himself to a cookie from the plate on the garden table. Chuck, something in the news triggered a memory. It related to these. It's in Canada. The park that's been closed down. I've been there before, Chuck, I just know it. There are answers there, answers I need. Xavier put his day top hat down and looked across, seeing Logan's claws extended. Do you wish to go and check it out? Would help. Logan growled. Shame Clark ain't here, those senses of his would be really useful. Anyone else available? I thought you worked alone. Xavier joked, then he sobered at Logan's expression. My apologies, it just wasn't what I expected of you. Speak and Storm are visiting Vivian, Martha, and Rogue are planning on heading out to do some shopping with Ileana, getting new clothes for her. Jean is currently out with Duncan while Scott is working on fixing his car. His friend Paul came round to help him, which is why we're currently in a no-powers situation. I would suggest Colossus. And maybe Kurt and Kitty too. Their skills may come in handy, while Kurt can get them both out of trouble almost instantly. Plus, it will give them some useful field experience. Thanks, Chuck. Logan said gratefully as he rose from the bench. Logan, before you leave, Xavier asked curiously, what caused your decision not to head out by yourself? I'm grateful for it, but... Logan seemed to slump slightly. The asteroid. I'd come to think of Flyboy as our greatest asset, our unstoppable force. Then we had to fight a battle in a place that would have killed him before he could even throw the first punch, and yet he still managed to help by bringing in reinforcements. He said afterwards that he'd managed to raise his top speed by half again. Anyway, it made me think, Chuck, made me think long and hard. So, Colossus, huh? Cyclops fought him in the asteroid, said he was a tough bastard. Looking forwards to fighting alongside him instead. Xavier smiled at Logan's rough compliment. We'll be heading off after dinner, giving plenty of time to pack. Logan said calmly, rubbing at his head. No way am I missing out on a Martha Kent lunch. You can leave earlier, if you want. Xavier said. Martha was talking about doing salad and sandwiches. I can ask her to make several picnic baskets and camp meals for you. Appreciated. Logan grunted as he walked off. Logan, Xavier called after him, I'll run a cerebroscan of the area, then cross-reference with satellite photos. It might help. Appreciated. Logan repeated as he walked back into the mansion. Xavier smiled wryly, then finished his tea. Starting to roll off, he paused and backtracked just long enough to grab the last 2 cookies from the plate. Wild trip. Kurt exulted as he walked into the hangar. Kitty shook her head as Colossus glanced across from where he was lifting several large containers into the Blackbird, under the supervision of Martha Kent. Colossus smiled at them and Kitty laughed. I expect you two to behave. A voice said and both kids turned to see a smiling Xavier. Both of you are going mainly because your powers are best suited to getting out of trouble. Kurt, if things go bad, get Kitty away from danger as fast as you can. Kitty, you use your powers to break the trail even more. It's very hard to follow someone through a cliff face, after all. Colossus? Kurt asked, causing the metallic man to laugh. I very strong, very tough. I walk out from falling building, no problem. The 2 young teens both stared at him wide-eyed, then Kitty broke the silence. Wow. Colossus shrugged, then picked up another container. It what I do. Thank you for cookies, Mrs. Kent. Ileana like very much, so do I. Martha dimpled as Colossus gave her a quick kiss on the cheek before he walked up the ramp, holding the heavy container as easily as if it was made from cardboard. Walking over, she hugged both teens. You two will be careful, won't you? V.E. shall, Fraulein Martha. Kurt said, returning her hug. I will bamfuzz out if there is anything bad. Good. Martha said, stepping back to look at them from arm's length. I don't want anything bad to happen to you, you're part of the family now. Kitty blushed as she returned the older woman's smile, then she and Kurt turned in response to Logan's call. You two coming or what? Coming. Kitty shouted, pausing to kiss Martha on her cheek. See you when we get back. Be safe. Martha returned as the duo half ran towards the Blackbird. Wahoo! Both Piotr and Logan struggled to hide their grins as Kit's shout of pleasure echoed through the rapidly accelerating plane. An instant later, the windscreen darkened slightly as the plane erupted from the waterfall-concealed tunnel and hurled itself into the air. This is so cool. Piotr glanced back to where Kurt was craning to look out of the side window, then back at Logan, who was shaking his head slightly, his lips twitching as he tried not to smile. Calm down, Kurt. Kitty said with a sigh. We've got quite a trip ahead of us. Are we nearly there yet? Kurt shot back and Piotr started to laugh while Kitty face-palmed. Logan shook his head. Don't make me turn this plane around. Both Kitty and Kurt gaped at Logan, who was scowling out of the viewport, then they slowly turned to face each other. Did Logan just? He did. Unnoticed by the 2 shocked teens, Logan's mouth twitched briefly into a smile while Piotr fought hard to keep from laughing at the smaller man's prank. The bunker was illuminated only by the screens of the computer. In the ceiling, embedded lights remained unlit as a shape moved through the Stygian blackness, the round glasses it was wearing only briefly catching the light. It stopped before one specific screen, a screen showing a map of America with several icons flashing on it, then it stepped forwards, revealing itself to be an old man. Soon, Weapon X, you'll be back where you belong. Isn't that right, Weapon 9? A hulking figure appeared and the man turned round to face it. Nothing to say? Oh, Right, not since I managed to get the project working like it should have been the first time. Well, soon you'll be back with your old partner, Weapons 9 and X, working together for the good of humanity. And I couldn't have done it without that crystal. The looming figure didn't respond and the man sighed. It's so hard, you know, being a genius. Very few people understand me. Oh well, your sparring partner is due to arrive before sunset. Go out there and spy on him. If he's alone, signal me at once. If not, lure him away from anyone he's with so that I can complete my project. Go. The hulking figure turned and loped towards the exit of the control room. The man smiled as the figure left. Victor, I wonder how your son feels about what you've become? I think he'd be proud. You're finally using your powers for the good of humanity. The man's laughter echoed through the bunker. The dusk was split by the quiet yet intense sound of engines as the pitch-black plane rippled into view, descending into an almost feather-light touchdown. The engines spooled down and silence briefly reasserted itself before a hatch opened on the belly of the plane, lowering to create a ramp facing aft. A moment later, Colossus emerged and looked round. Clear. We know. Kitty sighed, strolling down the ramp as Kurt teleported to the base in a cloud of smoke. We checked the sensors, remember? Logan growled in agreement as he stalked down, rubbing at his head, and Kitty gave him a worried look. Wolverine, are you all right? You never get headaches, not with your healing power. I'll be fine. Logan grumbled. You two, back inside and set up the bunks. Colossus, go left, I'll check right, just to be safe, then we meet back here. We'll start the proper search tomorrow. At Colossus' nod, Logan stalked off, muttering. Damned headache. I'm gonna need some aspirin or something. Chapter 3, Discoveries. The darkness of space seemed to ripple and flex before a vortex formed, connecting the four basic dimensions of reality briefly to the higher dimensions. The warp vortex briefly stabilized, just long enough for a silver craft to transition through it, then the vortex winked out of existence. In the cockpit, Clark Kent lightly tapped several controls, his sapphire blue eyes flicking between the main viewport and several screens mounted both above and below it, screens showing various readouts and selected imagery. Proximity scans complete. An artificial female voice said. Current threat rating, negligible. Switching to navigational scanning. Clark nodded, even though there was no one else around to see him. Set priority for energy sources indicative of active power systems. Confirmed, scanning priorities adjusted. Clark leaned back in his seat and glanced out of the viewport again. In front of him, a large conglomeration of asteroids floated, illuminated by the star which provided the gravitational anchor for the remnants of the system. A brief flick of the controls sufficed to set course and the Javelin began to edge towards the asteroid field that had once been the planet Krypton. The internal gravitational generators compensated perfectly for the minor amount of acceleration, and Clark glanced at the inaccurately named radar, seeing if the dimensional scanners had detected anything of note. Alert, multiple energy readings detected in primary sensor target locus. Clark's gaze snapped across to the main screen, where several icons glowed. A moment later, the HUD integrated into the view screen displayed several carets, each indicating where the relevant target was, while the size of the projection showed how close the detected energy was. All of the projected brackets were smaller than Clark's thumbnail. Run diagnostics on anti-collision shields, Clark ordered, increasing the throttle slightly, and plot out the courses of any asteroid large enough to be a danger to the Javelin. Confirmed. Target 3 acquired. Clark skillfully piloted the Javelin through the asteroid field, reflecting once again that the density was incredibly low compared to what he had seen in several films. Adjusting course slightly to avoid the only rock within a kilometer of the target, and which just happened to have been in the way, Clark sighed as he saw his destination, another shattered building. Assuming that the gaping cavern had once been the main entrance, it looked like almost two-thirds of the building had somehow managed to remain relatively intact, although the angle he was approaching from allowed him to see that most of the floors inside had collapsed, probably from the shockwave that had launched the building into space. The light from the Javelin's searchlight illuminated the interior with the knife-edged shadows characteristic of vacuum, and Clark frowned as he peered into the building's depths. Computer, scan. Source of target. Target has been positively located and confirmed as power core. Estimated charge, 3%. Significant damage to power core has been detected. Clark sighed as he examined the readout. Alright, lock in the location and mark as low value. Locate nearest unexplored target to current location. Final target acquired. Clark sighed as he eased the javelin into position. Only 3 of the targets had contained anything actually worth collecting. The destruction of Krypton had indeed been incredibly violent. The glance he sent at the readouts was only cursory. Damn. Another low-value one. I guess it was too much to hope it could be another number 4. Alright, quick scan for any other signs of Kryptonian tech not already located. Signal detected. Clark stared. Signal? What signal? From where? Signal originates from Argo. And why did you not mention this signal earlier? Clark asked in a too calm voice. Primary scanning priority was set for active power systems. A transmission is. Clark began, then he sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Localize origin of transmission and place on display. Confirmed. The javelin touched down on the silent planetoid and a moment later, a silver-clad figure with a red cape emerged. Encased in his spacesuit, Clark checked his HUD, then lifted himself to just above the surface of the planet and drifted forwards towards the wreckage of the domed city. As he drifted towards it, the city seemed to expand further. The pockmarked crystal buildings loomed up, some of them reaching and supporting the portions of the dome that had somehow managed to survive the bombardment of asteroids and meteors that had once comprised the planet Krypton. Clark paused in front of one of the larger buildings. Although a large portion of it had been turned into crystalline rubble, several walls still stood, walls with symbols embossed upon them. In the middle of the wall, a huge hole had all but replaced the symbol for Krypton. Only the lower point of the stylized crystal encasing and protecting a planet remained, but it was enough that Clark recognized it from the history files in the fortress. The building had once been the Argo governor's home. Flanking the destroyed icon, other icons were present in bas relief, each icon a monument to a now-vanished house. A hand in a circle, a 12-pointed star with half of it shadowed, a sword with the pommel high and a pair of daggers crossed in front of it, point up. And a crest that was as familiar to him as anything. A dragon snake imprisoned in crystal, referencing the potential for destruction held in check by pure willpower. The crest of the House of El. For what seemed like an eternity, Clark stared at the wall of crests, a wall which once proudly proclaimed the unity of those who had chosen to move to Argo and create a new life there, a wall which now held only the echoes of a once great civilization. A civilization destroyed by its unwillingness to face an uncomfortable reality. A civilization of which he was the last. Around him, the city seemed to whisper with the light wind, the remainder of the once breathable atmosphere that had been blasted away by the destruction of Krypton. The thin air, only a small amount away from being a vacuum, hissed and moaned as it swirled through the fallen monuments to former glories. Former lives, loves and laughter. Gone, in one single, self-inflicted apocalyptic disaster. A single beep from the detector roused Clark from his contemplation and he glanced down at the screen, then turned away from the ruined building. Flying mere inches above the dust-covered ground, Clark soon came to a halt in front of the one building that had somehow survived relatively intact, a building which actually showed signs of repair, thus proving that at least a few Kryptonians had managed to survive the disaster. To Clark's amazement, the main door opened as he approached, revealing it to be the outer hatch of an obviously improvised airlock. Moving into it, he watched the door close, then his helmet readouts changed, indicating that breathable air was being pumped into the chamber. A low tone sounded and the inner door opened, allowing Clark to move further into the building, retracting his nano-suit as he did so. ## greetings, whoever you are ## a voice said in formal Kryptonian. Clark spun round and found himself facing a hologram of an elderly, sick-looking Kryptonian male. ## my name is Zor-El and I am one of the last of the surviving Kryptonians. By the time you hear this, whoever you are, I will have gone into the great darkness ##. Clark stared at the man, unable to formulate any thoughts, much less questions. ## this building houses the last of the Kryptonian race ## Zor-El said sadly. ## we were unaware of the dangers of the green rocks that were created in the destruction of Krypton. Many of us perished before we truly recognized the danger they represented. More of us grew so ill that stasis became our only choice. Of the 300,000 who lived here before the disaster, only 57 still live, not including myself, and all are in stasis, having been affected by the green rocks ###. Clark swallowed. 57 Kryptonians still alive? ###We managed to salvage the most important things we could, and we set up a series of stasis chambers below. Our youngest ones are in the true stasis chambers, the chambers we liberated from the medical center. As for the others, we did our best to duplicate the stasis chambers, but we do not expect more than a few of them to hold out, if any. But even a slim chance is better than none ###. Zor-El paused and his gaze seemed to intensify. ### In the underlevels of this building you will find us. Should none of the adults survive, then I charge you with this. Find a way to heal our children and raise them as your own. Krypton is no more, though our history is transcribed. Our arrogance and refusal to listen to my brother's warnings destroyed us. We are gone, but to you, whoever you are, we leave our legacy, we leave our children ###. Please, save them ###. Clark stood frozen as the hologram vanished. After a moment, he looked round and his eyes came to rest on an embossed sign, the Kryptonian runes easily translated. Stasis chamber. Moving to the indicated archway, Clark looked down the long, spiraling ramp. My God! Clark's whisper somehow caused the near silence to intensify. The large room in front of him was well lit, and was far more crowded than any of the other rooms he had seen. In the middle, on a slightly raised dais, 14 stasis chambers were arranged in a circle, all of them connected to large conglomeration of machinery. Even from the archway, Clark could see that 5 of the stasis chambers had failed. The thing that tore at his heart, though, were the chambers arrayed around the edge of the room. All 43 of them had failed. Several of them were half open, the corpses of their occupants visible, while others had frozen over or failed in other ways. And sat in a chair in front of the dais was the body of Zor-El, his eyes closed as he maintained his duty as a guardian, even in death. In his emaciated hands was a flat pick showing a younger, happy Zor-El standing with a woman, a small girl and another couple that Clark recognized as his mother and father. Clark stopped in front of Zor-El's body and reached out, lightly touching his shoulder. Your task is complete, Zor of the House of El. Clark said, intellectually knowing that what he said probably didn't matter, but feeling the need to say it anyway. May your spirit find peace, for you have my word. I shall take the 9 children to Earth and if I can revive them, I shall. Clark bowed his head in acknowledgement of Zor-El's sacrifice, then stepped forwards to examine the pods. As he did so, his eyes widened at what was embedded into the supporting machinery. Q&A samples. Only silence answered him and Clark exhaled in shock. Zor-El, you genius. He whispered. Q&A samples, a chance to recreate the Kryptonians, this time for the better. A brief grin crossed Clark's face and he finished moving to the circle of pods. Looking down at them, he noted the runic plates on the lids. What the? The final stasis pod slipped into place in the cargo compartment of the Javelin and the connection port interfaced successfully with the hastily installed support systems. The display of the pod flickered slightly, then the readings stabilized as Clark gave a sigh of relief. Once again, he looked at the readouts, then he placed a hand on the pod lid. You're the least affected, so when I get back to Earth, I'll do my best to revive you. Clark said, even though the person in the pod couldn't possibly have heard him. Kara Zor-El, cousin, I'll do my best to revive you, to revive all of you. Clark stepped back and looked down the line of secured pods. I thought I was the last son of Krypton, the last of the House of El. I was wrong. I promise you, all of you, whether from the House of El, the House of Var, of Ol, or the others, I will find a cure for you all. Kryptonite will not take away my new family, you will join mine when you awake from your long sleep. I promise you, you will live again, even if it takes the rest of my life. For another moment, Clark stood staring at the pods, then he stepped back and hit the controls. With an almost inaudible whine, the hatchway closed, plunging the hold into a darkness relieved only by the status displays of the 9 pods, the occupants held forever on the brink of death. waiting for the distant day when they could be revived and step forth once more. Chapter 4, Conspiracies. Report. Weapon X has been reclaimed. The scientist smirked, glancing over at Wolverine and Sabretooth, who were both stood at attention, their faces blank. The new setup has proven more than adequate to the task of controlling them. Very good, Thornton. Trask smirked. I look forwards to receiving your full report, but for now, give me the highlights and your plans. The Kryptonian crystal that your scientists provided and which I integrated into the central supercomputer array allowed the implanted control chips to reach their full potential. With the chips no longer needing to pre-process the neural data, the biocontrol circuits could be repurposed to fully overpower their free will, turning them into perfect remote-controlled soldiers and assassins. Weapon 9 and Weapon X are ready for deployment, and this time, they will not be able to break free. On the screen Trask grinned fearfully, a grin that Thornton returned in equal measure. And do you have a plan to test them? I do. Thornton gloated. Weapon X came to the area in the company of a trio of mutants. I intend to use Weapons 9 and X to hunt down and kill the mutants. Should their powers prove interesting, I'll override the instructions and have them captured for dissection instead. It may be worth it to see if we can reverse engineer any interesting powers to create more enhanced humans. Powers taken from mutants and used against them. Trask smirked. Permission granted, Professor. Good luck. Humanity will prevail. Humanity will prevail. Thornton replied as the screen went black. After a moment, he rose from his chair and walked slowly over to the two mutants. After a few minutes staring at the motionless duo, he nodded slowly. Magnificent. Soon I will control an army. Professor. Yes, Kitty? What is it? Xavier's voice replied. It's Logan. Last night, he just left, muttering something about checking out something, and he hasn't returned. Colossus had a look round, but couldn't find any sign of him. I see. Xavier replied after a long pause. Are you and Kurt currently in the Blackbird? The door is closed. Kurt said from his seat. Colossus ordered us to zete hier while he checked out ze Vorest. Call back in 5 minutes. Xavier said calmly. I'm heading for Cerebro now to perform a scan. The radio went silent and both teens exchanged worried looks. Vi had if it was something that Logan could not win against. Kurt finally asked and Kitty shivered. Logan can win against anything or anyone except Clark. If what's out there can take down Logan. Und with Clark on his Sikvit tvip. Kurt added, his accent getting stronger as his worry increased. Kitty nodded. We may be in real trouble. I hope that Colossus gets back soon. Kurt rose from the chair and looked out of the main viewport, scanning the edges of the surrounding forest. Till nothing. He said with a sigh. This is nerve-wracking. I know. Kitty sighed. I only hope that, eek. Kitty leapt backwards as a black-clad figure thrust a trio of heartbreakingly familiar metal claws through the viewport, missing her by mere millimeters. Without even pausing, Kurt grabbed the scared teen and they both vanished in a cloud of smoke. Teleportation. Thornton mused, watching the screen showing what Weapon X had seen. That's quite some power, although the physical aspect of it is nauseating. On the second screen, a metal mutant was sent flying away from the viewer, smashing through a tree. Thornton gazed at the figure curiously, then shrugged. A simple physical enhancel. How boring. Looks quite tough, though. I wonder if I should have sent Weapon X after that one? Oh well, no point crying over wasted time. I'll reassign him once the two others have been eliminated. Xavier's eyes slammed open in shock and he removed his helmet with shaking hands. Taking a deep breath, he activated the COMM. Kitty. Professor. Logan attacked us. Xavier nodded even though Kitty couldn't see him. I know. I sensed the whole thing. Sabretooth is out there as well, and something is controlling them both. Something, cold and amoral. Whoever is controlling them is to the north, under the mountains, but the area that person is in is shielded. I can't get much detail. Okay, Professor, we'll check it. Oh shit. We gotta go. The comm went silent and Xavier stared at it in worry for a while before reaching out to the comm again. Punching in a new combination, he steepled his fingers as he waited for an answer. "Hello. It has been some time, old friend," Xavier said, keeping his voice calm. "I hope I am not interrupting something, but I seem to have a problem that I was hoping you could help me with." Kitty blinked as the world seemed to vanish in smoke, then with a flash of red it reappeared. Looking round frantically, she breathed a sigh of relief. "It'll take him a little while to get up that cliff." Hope so. Getting tired?" Kurt panted and Kitty shifted to support him, pulling his arm across her shoulders. Looking round, she blinked, then frowned. "That cave, there's a small path leading into it." Kitty glanced at Kurt, then set off, Kurt stumbling along by her side. "A cave with a path indicates it's being used for something. What do you want to bet that whoever's controlling Logan is in there?" Kurt blinked as he thought it through, then he shrugged. "It will be barricaded." "How we get, oh. Never mind." Kitty smirked as they entered the cave and were confronted by a large set of reinforced steel blast doors. Pausing only long enough to test the doors with her hand, she smirked in triumph. "No energy shields. Come on, let's get going." Kurt grinned as Kitty pulled him through the closed portal. "What?" Thornton stared in shock at the monitor showing a view of the main entrance, an entrance through which the duo of mutants had passed as if the reinforced metal doors had been a simple curtain of water. The pair paused, looking around, then headed further into the hall, passing through the second, heavier, door with the same apparent lack of effort. Shit. Thornton cursed, his fingers flying over the control boards. "Mutants are in my base. Mission override to Weapons 9 and X, disengage and return to base to eliminate the intruders. Priority Alpha." The scrolling view of one of the screens didn't show much change since Weapon X was already heading towards the bunker, having tracked his target's scent trail despite the gaps in it. The image of the other screen, however, whirled and spun as Weapon 9 slashed at a tree, causing it to pin the metal man, before the view showed that the controlled mutant was heading back at high speed, running on all four limbs in order to move quicker. Thornton smirked and turned his gaze back to the screen showing the progress of the intruders, completely missing the glimpse that Weapon X had of an odd angular aircraft swooping down towards where the metal man had been pinned. "Hey, Stretch. Susie. Over here. We got one." Colossus opened his eyes and found himself staring at a bipedal orange rock thing clad in a pair of blue trousers. "What? Hey, you're awake. We came to help you. Let me get a grip, now push." Colossus braced his hands against the tree and thrust with all his strength, driving his shoulders down into the ground. Combined with the Rockman's efforts, it was enough to lift the tree off him and they let it drop to his side. "Thanks. You're Colossus, right?" "I'm the ever-loving blue-eyed thing, but you can call me Ben." His rescuer grinned, oddly white teeth sparkling. "We got called in to back you up. Apparently your friend Wolverine's been brainwashed or some it, so you and I can pin him down while Stretch works out what's wrong." "Not just Wolverine." Colossus grunted as he allowed Ben to pull him up to his feet. "Sabretooth hit with same thing too. He managed to pin me, then dash off somewhere. I hope kids are okay. I have Sabretooth located, north-northeast, moving fast." Another voice said and Colossus peered past Ben to see one of the most famous scientists in the world standing there, clad in a white and blue jumpsuit. "I just sent Johnny and Susan out to provide advanced recon. Care to join us?" "I promise Martha I would take care of kids," Colossus stated. "I keep promise." We go. Mr. Fantastic agreed. "The Fantastic car is a half-mile that way, but given how big you, that's useful. Use that when we get there." Piotr grinned as he reactivated his mutant power, regaining 6 inches in height as he transformed back into his metal form. "We go?" "Yeah, let's go," Ben said with another sparkly grin. "Good to have another heavy hitter aboard. Interested in joining us?" "The Fantastic Five. I already X-Man," Colossus said as he started to run, keeping pace with Ben and Reed Richards. "I work for Xavier, work with Superman." Why isn't he here? Reed asked, his voice showing only honest curiosity. Secret mission to somewhere? Colossus shrugged. I not ask, not my business. Not need to know. Pity, Superman be useful. Wolverine not able hurt him. Wait. Reed said, his voice suddenly intense. Logan has adamantium claws that can cut through almost anything. Not Superman. Colossus said proudly as they entered the clearing and approached the multi-cockpit craft. Heh, we'll have to have a spar sometime. Ben grinned as he got into the front portion of the craft. This place is creepy. Kitty said quietly as they entered yet another lab. Like the ones before, this one showed signs of heavy use, and also of rushed evacuation. Several documents still remained on the ground while a large board held a variety of blueprints and x-rays. Hey, that one is Logan's. Kurt gasped and Kitty followed his gaze to one of the x-rays, one showing bones in a trio of very familiar blades. Next to it was another x-ray of a hand, this one smaller and with only 2 blades, while just below it was an x-ray of a foot which had 1 blade in it. What was this place? Kitty asked in shock, looking at the other sheets showing a set of wings, a skull with 6 eye holes, another with horns and elongated fangs. Several of the images didn't even look human. And how is it linked to Logan? An excellent question, young lady. A voice suddenly said. You have a very inquiring mind, such a shame that you're a mutant rather than a human. Had you been human, you might have had potential. Kitty almost fell over in shock as the amplified voice echoed through the concealed facility, then she growled as what the mysterious person had said registered. What do you mean, I'm not human? My parents are both human, that makes me human too. If only it were that simple. The voice replied calmly. However, your DNA tells a different story. You see, mutants have what is known as the X gene, a complex genetic twist that interacts with the mental and physical aspects of the person and changes them. Take your friend, for instance. A teleporter who looks like a demon, and appears in clouds of black smoke. He may have been human once, but when his X gene activated, no longer. It was forced. Kurt grumbled. Forced. J.A. Kurt shouted angrily. Main power should have been only physical, but main secondary mutation was forced, and I can teleport. Secondary mutation. The voice said slowly. I was unaware of such a thing, how fascinating. Girl, did you know about that? Duh. Kitty mocked, looking round for any sign as to where the speaker was. Sure, Superman, Forge and the professor have been doing research into it. Secondary mutations are rare, but they're generally more powerful than primary mutations. And while primary mutations usually happen during puberty, we still don't know what sets off secondaries. How fascinating, came the response. Until now, we thought all mutants had a single power spread, a primary power and maybe a few linked secondaries, such as being able to control fire and being fireproof. But this whole secondary mutation phenomenon. This will need more research. I guess that this means that I have to have one of you taken alive. Kurt's gasp alerted Kitty to the appearance of Logan and Creed, both of whom had blank expressions on their faces as they advanced. Not good. Kitty whimpered, then suddenly the advancing duo were yanked backwards through the doorway they had entered from. A couple of thumps and crashes sounded, then a familiar voice spoke. Kitty, Nightcrawler, you okay? Colossus. Kitty sobbed in relief. I'm detecting microchips implanted into their cerebellums. Another voice said as a struggling Logan was carried in by Colossus in a knocked-out Sabretooth by a figure that Kurt instantly recognized. No vihe. Die Fantastis Convire. The four and only. A younger voice laughed as Johnny Storm sauntered into the room, a ball of fire in his hand providing illumination. Johnny, stop showing off. A woman commanded and Johnny stopped posing and slumped. Ah, come on, sis. Can't I have any fun? A siren interrupted them and Ben cursed. Sounds like a self-destruct warning. We gotta scram. Thornton grabbed the data disks and crammed them into his bag, then turned the key that triggered the countdown for the self-destruct. Not even stopping to give the screens one last glance, he quickly walked out of the control room, breaking into a run as he headed further down towards the concealed hangar and the plane within. Arg! A blast of dust and debris propelled by super-compressed air and high explosives lanced out of the concealed entrance, slowing and spreading as it did so. An instant later, a faintly glowing transparent sphere containing 9 figures finished arcing through the air, crashing down onto a large pond and vanishing as it did so. The 9 hit the water and quickly surfaced, 2 of them still out cold and supported by the 2 largest figures. "Good thing it's shallow," Ben commented, looking round. "Everyone okay?" "No," Johnny whinged. "Do you have any idea how long it took me to style my hair this morning? And now it's ruined." "Stop being such a girl," Susan and Kitty said simultaneously, then they glanced at each other and started to laugh even as Johnny pouted at the lack of sympathy he was receiving. "Thanks for help," Colossus said, lifting Logan up and slinging him across his shoulders. "We owe you anything for a friend," Reed replied, wading towards the bank of the pond, his arm across Susan's shoulders. "Now come on, let's dry off, get the cockpit repaired on your plane and get you lot back to the Institute." "Oh, can I fly the Blackbird?" Johnny asked, his irritation forgotten. "Please? It's way cooler than the Fantasticar." In a move so synchronized that it could not have been rehearsed, Susan, Reed, Ben and Piotr all face-palmed while Kitty and Kurt tried not to fall down laughing. Chapter 5, New Class. The blue-green sphere slowly grew as the javelin sliced through space towards it, the precious cargo that was all that remained of the once proud Kryptonian civilization tucked into its holds. At the control panel, Clark frowned as he listened to the reports. "So we managed to use Kitty's power to extract the inside of the microchips without causing any damage. With the control circuits gone, what's left won't be of any use whatsoever to anyone and won't do any damage. Logan's already woken up, Sabretooth is still out cold. We placed him into a stasis tube until you could get back." Clark nodded slowly. "Excellent decision, Gene. When I get back, I'll fly him to Alaska again." Gene's laugh echoed through the comm, as did Logan's chuckle. "Good to have you back, Flyboy. We're still getting the new mutants settled in, we're going to need you to mentor them for a while. However, we don't expect to deploy them in the field for quite some time. We haven't told them about you, yet," Gene added, although several of them seem to have realized that you are linked to the Institute, given that Scott gave them his code name and was promptly mobbed. Clark grinned at that. "I see. Thank Krypton that I'm invulnerable. Is Xavier available?" "Chuck's at the school arranging with enrollments with the new principal, everyone else is having lunch." "Why?" "I found 9 of my people in stasis, most of them suffering heavy kryptonite poisoning. I think one of them can probably be revived without too much trouble once I get back. The other 8 are stable in stasis, so they can wait until I scan them to determine the amount of kryptonite contamination and how to deal with it." For a moment, a shocked silence seemed to radiate from the comm, then Logan spoke. "I think you broke them, Flyboy. The notion of 10 Kryptonians flying around, you could rule the damned planet." "Why would we want to?" Clark countered. "And remember, S.H.I.E.L.D. has several tons of kryptonite available to it, we'd all be dead before we could conquer even 3 continents. Tried to plan it out, did you?" Logan chuckled. "I was bored." Clark mock-whined, then he stopped joking. "Seriously, the notion of having 9 others, all as powerful as myself and with no real emotional links to Earth, not good. I am still deciding which plan to use. My first plan was to start off with my cousin, Kara Zor-El, who seems to have been the least affected by kryptonite. Once she's settled in and comfortable, to stasis the next and get them settled in, then slowly repeat. The second was to wait until I could revive all of them together, thus allowing them all to help each other adapt. Since they're in stasis now, it doesn't matter from a medical viewpoint how long they remain so. We can wait until we're sure they can be safely revived, no matter how long it takes." "And when do you plan to start?" Logan asked curiously. Clark shrugged. "Not for a while. We need to get the new students settled first. Having someone who doesn't understand English and is liable to accidentally demolish walls would be a complication we don't need." "How do you know about Cannonball?" Clark blinked. "What?" I'll explain once you get back and introduced. Logan sighed. Good to have you back, Flyboy. What are we doing out here? One of the girls half moaned as they congregated where Storm had directed them. Scott smirked at them, ignoring several of the glares that were sent his way. Okay, most of you have had a full day or so to settle in. The 3 who arrived this morning have been assigned rooms and roommates. In case you missed it, I am Scott Summers, one of the senior students here. You probably know of me from when I hit the news a while back under my codename, Cyclops. A hubbub of excited comments and shouted questions drowned him out and he waved for silence. Questions will be answered later. Aurora Monroe is known as Storm, she can control the weather and is one of the teachers here. Logan here is Wolverine. Quiet please. Once again the new students quietened down. As I was saying, Scott said sternly, Logan is in charge of security here, although he often helps out with physical training. Martha Kent here is in charge of anything food-related. She may not be a mutant, but she's the best chef you'll ever meet, as the lunch you just finished proved. A spontaneous round of applause and cheering caused Martha to smile and blush. Pyotr Rasputin, known as Colossus, is our newest faculty member. His sister, Ilyana, isn't a mutant, but if anyone tries to pick on her or upsets her in any way, that person will regret it. Jean Grey is the other senior student here. She's a telekinetic and telepath. Behind her is Forge, he's our resident genius inventor. The other students here are Kurt Wagner or Nightcrawler. Kurt, can you drop the holo please? Everyone stared as an embarrassed Kurt spun the dial of his watch and seemed to shimmer, revealing his true form. Scott's next words had him grateful that his fur hid his blushing. The beautiful girl almost grafted onto him as his girlfriend, Amanda Sefton. While she is not actually a student here, she is always welcome, and those two are a prime example of the friendships that can form between humans and mutants. And she's easy on the eyes. Amanda blushed and gave Scott a glare promising retribution as the new students laughed. Scott merely grinned. Moving on, we have Anna Kent, also known as Rogue, Martha's adopted daughter. Skin contact allows her to borrow your powers, so don't be upset if she refuses to hug you. Near her is Storm's nephew Evan Daniels, also known as Speak, then Catherine Kitty Pryde, or Shadowcat. The professor is still at the Bayville High and we have one more person who's just dealing with a small matter, but for now, can each of you introduce yourselves as I point to you? You first. The blonde girl grinned and strutted forwards, creating a glowing sphere in her hand. Tabitha Smith, boom boom. Matching action to words, she tossed the sphere into the air, where it exploded, causing several muttered comments and whistles of approval. Scott nodded and looked at the next person. Roberto da Costa. The dark-skinned teenager grinned. Sunspot. I use solar power to boost my strength and fire energy blasts. I can even fly. Sounds useful. Scott nodded. Another solar-powered member, huh? We may have to equip you with a solar battery if you can't hold more than a couple of hours worth of power. Roberto raised his eyebrows appreciatively as he stepped back, letting the next one forwards. Robert Drake, but you can call me Bobby, or Iceman. I can create ice, like this. Bobby thrust his hand forwards and fired a blast of ice at the fountain, which promptly froze over. I think you'll be on cold drink duty. Scott joked. Now who, whoa. Scott dodged backwards as a reddish-brown furred wolf seemed to explode from the assembled students, racing towards him before skidding to a halt as it almost flowed upwards and turned into a teenage girl. Ronnie Sinclair. The girl said with a soft Scottish accent. Wolfsbane. Scott opened and closed his mouth several times before shaking his head. Well, thanks for the demonstration. Perhaps next time, we can do it without the heart attack. Chuckling quietly, Ronnie walked back to the students as a dark-skinned girl stepped forwards. Amara Juliana Olivian Zakia, also known as Magma. Limited ground control, and I can summon lava from below the ground. Amara stepped back, but failed to notice the young boy coming forwards and tripped over him, both of them tumbling onto the ground. Everyone stared as Amara tried to scramble to her feet, only to freeze, staring at the 5 identical boys looking at her. Heh, this is kinda embarrassing. We're Jamie Madrox, but you can call us Multiple. I can see why. Logan grunted. Next. Jubilationally, said the Oriental girl, stepping round the one-boy crowd and flinging a barrage of sparkling energy into the air before adjusting the sleeves of her yellow jacket. You can call me Jubilee, though. Nice shades. Scott noted, causing a ripple of laughter. Who's next? Ray Carter, Berserker. Electrical generation and projection. Said one of the last two, then the other stepped forwards. Samuel Zachary Guthrie, Cannonball. Limited flight and I can create a type of personal force field that makes me unstoppable. Scott nodded appreciatively. Wow, quite a range of powers. Hey, Roberto said with a mischievous smirk. What can we say, we're good. Maybe even better than Superman. Well, that sounds like something that I'll be willing to test for you. A new voice said and everyone's gaze jerked upwards, focusing on the familiar descending figure. And, making a late but perfectly timed entrance, Jean announced laughingly, we have the powerhouse and nicest guy of the team, Superman, known to us as Clark Kent, Martha's son, and Rogue's big brother. Too many powers to list, and the source of most of the technology we use at the Institute. Clark landed just in time for Rogue to slam into him, giving him a large hug. Clark is the only one of us currently immune to Rogue's powers. Scott added as all the new arrivals simply stared, wide-eyed. I think you broke them. Kitty giggled and Clark returned her smile. Oh, my God. Jubilee half whispered. We've got Superman teaching us. Hey, Flyboy. You deal with the trash. Logan growled and Clark nodded at him. Dumped in the same place as last time. Erg. Cold and tired, Creed pulled himself clear of the hole in which he had awakened and rolled onto his back. Looking round, he frowned in thought, then slumped back onto the layer of snow. Here. Again. Alaska. Again. Must have been Superman. Again. Damn him. After several moments, Sabretooth pulled himself to his feet. Looking round, he started to slowly walk downhill, grumbling under his breath. Superman. Roberto said for what seemed like the 50th time that day. We. No. Ray growled, glaring at the slightly shorter teen. I think it's cool. The reintegrated Jamie said from behind them. I mean, he's already, what's that noise? Everyone stopped and listened. Sounds, like sloshing. Jubilee said after a moment. More like squelching. Amara mused, then she stuffed her fist into her mouth in an attempt to not laugh as the source of the noise came round the corner. Everyone stared at Scott Summers as he lurched past, completely drenched and leaving a trail of small puddles behind him. Constant mutters and growls marked his passage as he went round the next corner and vanished. After a long, shocked moment, Jubilee summed up their feelings. What the heck? Payback for embarrassing me and Kurt earlier. Amanda laughed as she appeared behind them. Kurt teleported him to above the swimming pool. 3 times. After another long silence, it was Amara who reached the only conclusion available. I am never going to even consider teasing you or Kurt. Or do anything else that could annoy you, for that matter. Good thing too. Amanda giggled. He's my blue plushie, and I don't intend to share. You're what? Jubilee asked, sure that she had misheard. Her blue plushie, unhappy to be so. Kurt said, stepping up from behind Amanda and hugging her, a hug which she instantly returned, resting her cheek on his head. Now, we have to go, I said I'll get her home. Before anyone could comment, the duo vanished in a cloud of sulphurous smoke. Once again, the corridor was silent for a moment. I don't know if that was cute or scary. Jubilee finally managed. So, what did you guys think? What? A room. Bobby exulted. It's like something from Star Trek. I could use my powers without damaging it. Samuel grinned. I'm so gonna be spending time here working on refining my powers. Yeah, there's 5 of these training rooms, although the biggest is called the Danger Room. Speak explained. Clark was kind enough to set things up so I could actually be in my games as the main character. An almost reverent silence descended on the group as they thought about that statement. Whoa, that is awesome. Tabitha finally managed. Mystique has put in a request for one to be installed for the Brotherhood. Speak said, then he noted the looks he was getting. They're a group who used to follow Magneto, but after he screwed them over they went independent, then kind of allied with us. Well, it's more a, we don't attack you, you don't attack us thing with a bit of, you fight your own enemies but we'll watch your back while you do so thrown in. As long as it works. Tabitha shrugged. You'll get briefed on them later. Heck, they go to Bayville High, so you'll almost certainly meet them. Speak added. Come on, by now, there'll be cookies. 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 Why are cookies so important? Bobby whispered and Speak looked over his shoulder, his expression suggesting that Bobby had just said the most idiotic thing that he had ever heard. Because Martha makes them, now come on. Check the description for the links to the author.